Today we're going to talk about knighthood in the Middle Ages. And so when you think of knighthood, what do you think of? Maybe you think of going to sleep, tucking yourself in, turning off the light, and getting ready for bed. Or maybe you think more like, it seems like I'm tucking myself in and the world is still awake around me, but I have to go to sleep because I have to go to school. But you lay your head down and you go to bed anyways. Well, that's not the night we're going to talk about today. We're talking about quite a different night, and I'm sure a lot of you are well aware of that. We are talking about knights and warriors and fighters. We're talking about knights in armor and how you became a knight, and maybe why they would dress up like knights, and how they would gain seniority in the knight world. And also a little bit about how life was for the knights and their rules, like you need to cover your mouth and your nose with your mask. What we're not going to be talking about, though, are the Vegas Golden Knights, or this guy who's also a knight, the Dark Knight. But none of that is what we're going to talk about. We are going to talk about these knights. So let's dive right in. Knighthood. So the knights existed in this thing called the feudal system, which was set up as a hierarchy or a kind of leveled government and ranking of who was important and who was not. And how that broke down was that the king was at the top, kings and queens. Then came the nobles or the lords. Those were the landowners, or priests might fit into that category as well. Those were the property owners. Then there were the knights, squires, pages. People just a little bit below that. They were the working people that worked fighting, protecting, things like that. And then there were the serfs at the bottom of the hierarchy, who basically didn't own anything and worked for other people's benefit and partially to, feed their own families, but mostly for others. So the knights were fighters, and they served under the nobles and lords, and they were expected to go to war whenever the king demanded it. To become a knight, a male had to be born the son of a knight or a nobleman. So in this hierarchy you're looking at, you couldn't jump up or down. Well, maybe you could go down. You couldn't jump up or down. What you were born into, if you were born a knight, so maybe your dad was a knight, you would be a knight as well. If you were born the king's son, you would be in line for the throne. If you were born a noble, you would be a noble. So it was primarily based on what your father did. Unless something crazy happened that you won the favor of the king, you wouldn't change your spot in society. So to become a knight, you had to be born the son of a knight or a nobleman. And when a boy was 7 years old, he was sent away to train as a page. The page served as an apprentice to the castle, waiting on both the ladies and the knights. Page just learns to dance, sing, and basically do as this kid's doing. You would be learning. You would be working your way up towards a higher place in society, or a higher role within your notch in society. So page is polished armored, clean chainmail, and when they turned 14, they were automatically nominated or bumped up to squire, which apprenticed directly to a knight and essentially just followed around doing whatever the knight said they should do. But the goal was to become a knight, and that would be the next step after squire, right? So you would do that, right? You learned wrestling to develop your strength. You practiced carrying a shield, helping the knight dress for the event, learning all the practices of being a knight. You also would practice joust, which was essentially riding a horse with a big stick against another person on a horse with a big stick, and you would try to knock the other person off. But the squire would practice with a dummy, for example, on a pole with a shield in one hand and a heavy sack or spiked iron ball in the other, and the squire would just try to stay on their horse. That was the first step. Now, knights would joust against other people on horses, but we were working up to our way. So when a squire was 17, he could become a full-on knight. First, though, he had to prove himself. in either a real or mock battle, so a joust or a melee. If he was deemed worthy to become a knight, the squire knelt before the lord or nobleman, who touched him on the shoulder with a flattened wooden sword, and the new knight then gave an oath of loyalty to the king that he would work to protect him. In return for his loyalty and service, a knight received a manor or a house to administer and take care of. Most knights could have cared less, though, what happened to the house. They weren't interested in houses. They weren't interested in managing any agriculture or community. So they left most of the responsibilities to a bailiff or a sheriff of the property, while they devoted all their time to training for combat, to fulfill their oath, and their loyalty of service to the king. So you can see here that even though knights or squires or pages were fairly low on the hierarchy, they were a well-respected member of the feudal system and a required member because they were the protectors of the community and the people that basically protected the king. And the king relied on them for that, and they relied on the nobles and the lords for something different, and the serfs for something as well. Everyone had their part, of course, right? So thanks for watching, and hopefully you learned a little bit more about knighthood and also the feudal system. Thanks.